Welcome to the Strategic Project Leader, where we help you leverage strategic project management so you can achieve your goals. Now, here's your host, Fola Alabi.
Good morning and welcome to another fantastic episode on the Strategic Project Leader. How is everyone doing today? As you know, on the Strategic Project Leader podcast, we are all about helping professionals and executives elevate by helping you accelerate the value you create as a leader. And how do you do this? By leveraging strategic project leadership skills. Today is not going to be any different because we're going to be bringing you a lot of great content, a lot of ideas that you can actually leverage in your career, in your business, and above all, in your personal life. I'm super excited today because I have someone all the way from the Netherlands. I don't know where you're actually joining us from, but let me know in the comments where you're joining us from today. I've got a thought leader, one who has actually shaped the world when it comes to strategy. He's an accomplished strategy educator. He's a mentor, he's an author, he's a consultant, and he brings over 2 decades of experience. Over 2 decades. He's come from academia, he's gone through the business world as well, and he's all about empowering leaders and organizations to discover, formulate, and execute their future plans by providing what innovative tools for forward-thinking strategy, making both personal and organizational development come to reality. He brings ideas from cognitive psychology, humanism, martial arts. My goodness, a wide range of so many things. It's all about helping you become the best, all about strategy. A lot of pieces around even learning strategy. Pieces around, leveraging tools that he is actually reading. He's authored so many books as well. And he's got something exciting actually popping that's going to be launching very soon as well. So don't hold your breath for too long. Join me as I bring on stage a great leader all the way from Netherlands, Jeroen Kraaijenbrink. How are you doing today, Jeroen?
Thank you, Fola, for this wonderful introduction. I almost feel embarrassed. I'm doing good. Thank you.
Fantastic. Great to have you live with us today. It's super exciting. What's the weather like today in the Netherlands?
Yeah, kind of mixed, warmish, in between anything. It's a bit of rain, a bit of sun, a bit of wind. Quite Dutch, actually.
Quite Dutch. I love that. I love that. It doesn't matter where you're joining us from. I want to say thank you. We've got Enes, we've got Say, we've got Arun from Mexico, Cleveland, India, Pakistan. Oh, we can actually see. We want to say thank you so much for being here today. Let's jump right in. A lot of people want to hear and want to know everything about strategy. Today, we're going to be talking about how we take strategy full circle for project professionals who wonder, how do I connect my role to strategy? How can I elevate? How can I become the catalyst that helps drives value from my organization? So we're going to be diving right in. Jeroen, when we think about strategy, what first of all brought you into the world of strategy management? Let's get a little bit to know about you first.
Mm-hmm. So what brought me here? The honest answer, I don't know. Interest. But it started at the university where my first career was in academia. So I was teaching strategy for some reason, and probably then I got sparked. And in 2 different ways. I think one is I like the topic. I think because it's kind of overarching. For me, it's also the most important topic in the company because it includes everything. So maybe there's an ego at play here. The other thing was increasingly, of course, not in the beginning, but some dissatisfaction with what I was teaching myself, and kind of a drive to dive into that from a research perspective, but later on also as a consultant. And ever since, I've been doing that one thing.
I love it. At times we get kind of thrown into a particular subject matter, right? And then when you get in, you kind of fall in love with it. I love the fact that you said strategy is almost at the backbone of every organization. Something actually drives that. So that kind of brings me to my next question. What exactly is strategy?
So can we use the rest of the broadcast for this question? No, of course, there's many different definitions of strategy, and as every author is doing, I add my own too. So for me, and that's also the definition that I use in my books. Strategy is it's the value creation of a company. So what is the unique and sustainable value that a company creates or any organization creates? And so that's a very short definition. And let me highlight a couple of elements there. One is value creation. So for me, it's not about the plan itself. It's not about competitive advantage, about gaining something, but it's what are you adding as a company? What's the value you create? So that means, what are your products and services? How are they different from what others are doing? How are they creating value for customers? So that's the core value creation. Unique, you want to do that. You want to differentiate yourself from any other organization. Not completely unique, but also not completely identical. So different from what others are doing. And the sustainability part, so creating unique and sustainable value, is sustainable in the broadest sense of the word. I know the word sustainability is used today basically to refer to climate change and saving our planet, which is one important aspect, but it's much broader. Because in strategy also, sustainability was always about being able to sustain what you do despite competitors trying to outperform you. So it's also this kind of long-term orientation. And it means, for instance, that you don't just create value for others, but that you also get something in return. So it includes your revenue model, the value you capture to get in return. Otherwise, you cannot last very long as an organization.
Without a doubt, when we think about organizations, they're in business for a reason, right? And so if you don't actually go through and look through and think about what your value proposition is, then there's obviously a problem. But when I think about the world of project management, I see projects being the engines of progress, right? That temporary endeavor that creates something unique. Projects pretty much sit right at the backbone that helps drive strategy, because when we think about where do we want to position ourselves to be, how are we going to get there? Projects get initiated as an outcome and output of whatever strategy the organization actually set from the start. So when we think about project management and strategy, how can we connect project management to strategy execution specifically?
Yeah, I think in two ways. I think it's always two directional. I think what you don't want is just projects. Of course, in any organization, there are projects that are not strategic or that are not linked to the strategy, but that's the place where I've seen also a lot of problems, because then it's just projects.
Yes.
And there is no overarching idea of why the project should be executed in the first place. So I think the first direction is from strategy to projects is with a solid strategy. You do have a framework, you do have a logic for your company, a logic that explains how you create value in a unique and sustainable way. And from that logic, you can basically detect or define or identify how is what we're doing today different from what we will be doing tomorrow. And those differences, you probably want to define different projects to bridge those differences. That's one, let's say that's the traditional order: strategy first, project second, or execution second. The other way around is just as valid as well, because projects, if done well, I think are also cyclical. There is a feedback, there is reflection, there's learning.
Yes.
And I think from the action taking place in a good project, you learn, and you want to include that information in your next strategy or in your update as well. So I think that's also the full cycle, or part of the full cycle that's in the title for this talk. It's bi-directional thing, and quite often we just look at the first. So we define a strategy and later on define projects to execute it. But it's a complete cycle.
And that's why it's extremely important for us to actually understand what exactly strategy is. Project managers are kind of faced in a unique position where they're brought in almost towards the later part of it, where strategy has already been set, has been defined, has been prioritized, and then we just have projects. However, our goal is to see how can we elevate and how can we get project managers or project professionals to chart a path where they can actually have a seat at the table to understand what really goes on. So when strategy is actually being set, what can the PM start visualizing to say, what do they need to understand when it comes to strategy definition from the very start? What do they need to think about? What do they need to be aware of?
Yeah, maybe part of the problem is that part of the answer is not necessarily at the project management level or the project manager level, but at the executive level. Because if the executive board or the management board is not willing to include others in the strategy generation or development process, then it's a very hard sell or a very, very hard situation for you as a project manager. And so the very first thing I think you can do as a project manager, if your company is currently not, or if your board is not that open to more participative, more engaging approaches to strategy, is talk to them, pitch it, try to kind of change their mind into a more participative approach. And there is a whole lot of research that kind of supports that you are right, that a top-down approach to strategy is not the best approach. So decades of research basically show that participation works, especially if it's kind of middle management participation. So that's kind of, I think, the first thing to do, but that's for the long run, because you don't change the way strategy is done in a company from today to tomorrow.
Yeah.
The other thing I think is focus on the part of the company, the projects you are responsible for. And within your own scope of influence, I think you can strategize. You can approach what you're doing in a strategic way. So that's also how I've built up my approach to strategy. It's a multi-level approach where at the company level, at a business unit level, at a department level, at a team level, up to the individual or down to the individual level, it's basically the same approach. So you could also start with your projects and think about those and approach those more strategically. And once you've gone through that experience and that has worked well, you have also more information to the rest of the company to show, hey, we've done this. It could be a pilot that could also work in other places at the company. And then really from your own position in the company, also start changing the way your organization is doing strategy.
I think I love that. That the pieces, a lot of the time, as you said, people within the project management group are not preview to the information or what actually happens at that C level, because executives sit down at times some strategies and then they formulate this. But if they had to get a little piece of the pie to understand what really goes on in those conversations, what should they be aware of as they prepare for this, trying to get themselves up that vertical to say what really happens in the room when strategy is actually being set? What should they be aware of that they probably don't even know today?
Yeah, maybe I have a disappointing answer. And what I try to do in my books and also in my approach is basically demystify strategy, because one of the problems with strategy is that it's mystified. It's made bigger than it is. It's kind of this grand, abstract, vague thing, and it must be grand, abstract, and vague because otherwise it becomes tactical or operational. I think that's a mistake. So for me, and that's kind of the next step in my approach, when you start with this definition of strategy is the unique and sustainable value creation of an organization.
Yeah.
I've opened up the black box and look at what's inside strategy. What are the elements of strategy? And the model I've created for that is the strategy sketch. It's a simple model, like a one-pager. And for those familiar with the business model canvas or the lean canvas, it's something like that, but then complete and with all the 10 ingredients or the 10 elements of strategy. And I think for a project manager and for anyone in the company, it's very important to be aware of those 10 elements. And then you don't even need the word strategy anymore. And let me just very quickly talk about these 10 elements. One side is your means as a company. That means on the one side, your competences and resources, plus your partners, your suppliers, your consultants, your bank, any partners that you work with. So that's the mean side. You have the market side, which is your customers and the competition. Then you have what I sometimes call the magic side. It's the inner core, which is your value proposition. So when you have clarity about your resources, your partners on the one side, you have clarity about your market, about your competitors, about your customers, and you know how you create value, you have one important, or like half of your strategy you have clarity about. Then it's also about how do you make money with that? What are the returns? And also what are the risks and costs? So that's the money side. Plus, what are the ambitions, the aspirations, the values that we're trying to achieve, and how does it fit the organizational structure and culture? And then finally, there's the world around us, the trends and uncertainties. There you have it. Those are the 10 elements. That's the white paper. And if you scroll a bit up or down, I don't know where you are in the paper, there's the picture, the strategy sketch.
Okay, fantastic. We're going to share that. And for everyone who's actually
Yeah.
joined us, there's going to be a link for you to actually sign up. You're going to get a copy of this strategy sketch. So that's a good thing. That's a free resource that we have got to actually help you so you can go and dive a little bit deeper. I want us to actually look in when we think about that competitive advantage piece of it, because at the end of the day,
Yes.
projects are more or less the drivers of whatever that is, because a competitive advantage could be maybe more profits, or it could be position in the marketplace, or whatever we actually think about. How can we then map out our projects? Because at times we find project managers find themselves in the position where they don't really have a say. They may say that, okay, I've been given a mandate to run a specific project. That's all they're privy to. How can they ensure that whatever role that they play ties into that bigger picture, especially when, they haven't got the authority to actually influence that, but they want to be sure that they can actually add value to the organization? I know it's a bit of influence, but what have you seen in the past, and how have you been able to kind of mentor, support project professionals to see how they can make that connection back to their overall strategic goals and objectives?
Yes. Could you share the screen again, and then with the sketch, with the picture, if you like, because that's obviously it's the heart of my approach, and also the way I look at strategy, and also part of the answer that I want to give to your question.
Okay, we're going to share that pretty quickly.
Yeah, because it's very important to kind of understand, on the one hand, the strategy of the company, and on the second, where are you in this strategy? And that's why I think this picture is very helpful. Yeah, this is it. Yeah, this is what I was describing before. The resources and competence and partners on the left, customers on the right, revenue model, risk on the top, and so on. When you are a project manager, and I'm going to assume you were not involved in the strategy of the company, there's one thing you can do is kind of reconstruct the strategy of the company using this model. So when you read the strategy report or listen to what the board is saying about this, try to define, okay, what are they actually saying about the value proposition, about the products and services? What are they actually saying about our markets? So the customers, the countries we should be in, the segments we should be targeting. What are they actually saying about the revenue model, the risk and cost? You probably will discover that the strategy generated by the top is incomplete. I've seen that too often. But that gives you a sense of, okay, what is, in more tangible terms, what is the company actually saying? Where does it want to move? How do these 10 elements look like? And then the second step is, once you understand, let's say I have this picture filled for the company, where are you with your project, with your team? And that could be related to some very specific boxes. If you are in the area of risk management or efficiency, you probably have a lot of information in the risk and cost box. But I think generally, you probably have many more of those, let's say, relevant information or relevant consequences for other as well. So if, for instance, and that's the way I also use it with, let's say, more functional strategies, where if there's an overarching picture of the company as a whole, we can define, okay, what does it mean for the marketing department? Okay, customer hire some people. Maybe they need to develop some new competences, follow some training. Maybe they need to partner up with a design agency, whatever. So you can also use this sketch to define, not just to understand at the corporate level what's going on, but also what does it mean for your project. So you can basically define gaps or initiatives in each of these 10 boxes, and those then become the source for your projects.
I think that's very, very good, because now you can actually see the little buckets in there. But another piece that I want to tie in is when we look at the whole picture and then a PM finds that, yes, my project may be helping us maybe reduce the risk that we kind of figure out, risk exposure. And they can see that direct correlation to say, okay, I know that I'm going to help the organization maybe impact that by 10%, whatever that number is. But what about when a project professional finds out that maybe there's really no connection? There's really no strategic value in what they're actually doing. How exactly, what do they need to do? How do they position to actually create that so that the organization kind of understands that there's really no point of us doing this? Because at the end of the day, whatever we do should obviously move the needle for organization in one way, shape, or form. And so if at the very top level, they cannot understand that, because I want to be able to equip strategic project leaders who definitely have a seat and say, this is how we can add value. This is kind of how we can become the giant in the industry, rather than just sitting back and say, let's just let things slide. So from your experience, how have you been able to get, to convince leadership that pretty much maybe the path they're going through is probably not the right one?
Yeah, there's one caveat here, is that most companies that I work with have already come to that realization, because otherwise they're not my clients. So in that sense,
you have an easy job then. My goodness. So you don't even,
in that sense, my life is easy. Yeah.
No,
yeah,
but okay.
Sorry.
No, over to you.
I've been with some companies for a longer period, and I think it's probably how politics works in a company, is finding allies, and with the pictures you just showed, you might be able to create a better story of why what you're doing is relevant, because sometimes that's the problem, that the leadership doesn't recognize that what you're doing is actually very relevant for the future and for the strategy. So by using a model like we just saw, maybe that helps to clarify, like, hey, this is where I add. It's these 5 elements with this project adds value to what you're trying to achieve. And the other way around, if it's not relevant, it's also the way to make it clear. So you probably, using a model like this, create a clear story, plus align with others. And of course, this is a very generic answer, because it depends very much on how the company works, how top down, how directive, how open the leadership is to getting suggestions. I know there's some leaders out there that are really not open to suggestions. Maybe then and if you're not doing something relevant and the leadership is not open to suggestion, maybe it's time to reconsider and look for another job, maybe. I know that. No, because that's one of the issues I've seen with companies, is that if the leadership is not behind this, it can be very tiresome, and it's not always worth it.
I know, but the reality, Jeroen, is that we actually faced in situations where it's never like a perfect organization. You are probably lucky you're a consultant where they kind of bring you another stage where they kind of know that we need something and then you come and fix it. But the life of a day-to-day professional is where they come in, they're thrown into a role and they're trying to swim rather than actually sink. How really can they navigate that? I know we've seen that strategy sketch. They're trying to connect their role to the organizational goals and objectives. And maybe it's actually all blurred. They kind of really chat a path to understand that. How can they tackle that? What can they do? What steps can they take, to get better understanding of what this looks like?
Yeah, and I think maybe to start with is just really focus just on your own sphere of influence, only your team, on your project, and start. And maybe it's the way I work with my clients, is get your team together, do one or few sessions where with that again, I will refer to this sketch probably too often, because that's just how I work with all my
Roadmap.
clients, also
Yeah.
with the mentoring, because it helps identifying where are the issues. So with your team, not involving any of the higher leadership in the company, evaluate what's going on in the company. Let everyone give their viewpoint, their input, their thoughts, their ideas, their concerns regarding these 10 elements, and then from there on, identify, okay, what are the issues, what are the key issues that we see. Then that may be issues with the strategy as a whole, maybe issues that what we are doing is not relevant. It may be issues that any type of issue. So what are the issues? What are the insights? So when we've done this exercise, this session with your team, what have we learned? So what are the new things we discovered together? Because and that's the part we have not talked about at all so far, doing this exercise with this sketch, or also in other ways, talking about strategy as a team, you will also discover that people have their very different viewpoints. They have some even opposed opinions on what's unique about what we do, what we should be doing, and what our customers are doing, and so on. So it also creates kind of alignment in your team by doing this together. So you have identified some issues, you have identified insights, and you probably also have identified ideas. There's always ideas in your team, in your project. I've never experienced a situation where there were no ideas. So when you have your issues, your ideas, and your insights, I think from there on you can basically define, okay, what are the main, within the scope of my project or within the scope of my responsibilities, what are the main initiatives that we should take? And I think from there on, I should probably stop talking, because then I get on the seat of the project manager, and I'm not a project manager. I don't know much about project management, at least probably far less than much of your audience. So it's very much how I do it with my clients. But then do it with your team, your level. And then when there are consequences or differences with the corporate strategy, sometimes it's also just do it. Don't talk about it, just go. And I think every project manager will have kind of some scope of autonomy where they can just do what they like, and maybe stretch that a little bit, be a little bit disobedient, maybe just take a little bit more room than you would formally have. And I know this differs a lot between companies. In some companies, you just have, here's your task, execute. In other companies, okay, go and do whatever you think is valuable. So I know there's a lot of differences there. But I would really treat your project, treat your team as a little company, and define the strategy for that, and then do what's needed.
I love that. But let's just take it now. So now let's imagine a scenario where there's a project and a project manager wants to define, create a strategy. But I want to see, how do they give them a little bit of a glimpse into the world of that corporate strategy circle? When you're brought in to create a strategy for an organization, what actually happens in those conversations?
Chaos. It's what you see is people, they what I try to achieve is people really speak from their opinions, their guts, their feelings, and not just talk what they think they should be talking about. So typically what happens, I put like 10 people in a room, I facilitate, and I ask a lot of questions. So if you were taking my position, you're asking lots of questions about those 10 elements, about how are things today, what's good and bad about it, how things should be tomorrow. So and that leads to these insights, issues, and ideas. I'm not sure whether I'm really answering your question.
You are. Go deeper. That's what we want to know. You are. Go deeper. We want to know. Yes. So, because the thing is, we have project professionals here who are kind of brought in kind of halfway through that process. But the path here is to help them elevate and get more vertically in the organization. And for them to even do that, they need to understand what really goes up in the Eiffel Tower, right? Right there. What's going on, how strategy being set. So we want to get you as an expert to come and give us a piece into what happens in those conversations. And then they could actually understand, oh, this is kind of how it connects to my project. This is kind of why I got this project. This is kind of why I've got these limitations as well. So just give us a piece of feeling to the world of what happens then and what the inputs are and probably what the outputs are as well.
Yes, and again, let me give a caveat, because I think what I do with my clients may not be representative for the average boardroom discussion. I'm quite sure it isn't, because what I see too often is that it's just talking about, on the one hand, high level mission, vision, let's say slogan stuff, very high level, short and simple, plus then move to objectives, targets, themes. And I think, to be frank, in most companies that I've seen, and maybe not most, but in many companies that I've seen, the actual strategy discussion is not taking place. So they move from a high level idea of kind of almost soundbite, like what is our slogan, our mantra for the next couple of years, because that's nice. They focus on the, let's say, the very high level stuff, and then define, okay, we need these 5 themes, and within these themes we have these projects and these objectives and these targets and so on and so forth. That's the disappointing part, I think, about that I've seen. I was quite shocked in the past that the lack of real strategic discussion, which is entirely what has driven me to develop this approach and write about this and teach it and talk about it as much as I can. Because what should be going on is a open, very transparent discussion on these 10 elements. And what it usually means, so I ask a question, for instance, it usually start with these resources and competences. Okay, what kind of assets, resources does this organization have that are unique, valuable? What kind of company, what can you do as a company that others cannot? Then you get a conversation. People might hesitate a little bit in the beginning because it's a difficult question.
Yeah.
But then they start answering, and I think what I try to do is every answer is good. So it's like this typical design process where it's divergent and convergence. Yeah. So in the beginning, or like in a brainstorm, anything is good. So the way I work, imagine the canvas on the screen with kind of Post-its or even brown paper and real Post-its. I do it digital nowadays. People talk, give their ideas, everything is good. So it quickly fills. You quickly get a lot of Post-its on there about your resources, about partners, and so on. Don't worry at all about what's good and bad. And then people, and that's the nice part, they hear from each other where they disagree. And those disagreements lead sometimes to discussion, but it's okay to disagree. So we get a lot of pretty chaotic information from these meetings, but talking about all these 10 elements in a very open, transparent way. And I think that conversation is just as important as the outcome, as the input, as the content of the strategy, because it means that people start aligning, that they start learning, that their mind is kind of changing. They prepare, they hear how things are different. So it's not like we put a lot of information in, then press a button and then there's a strategy. But it's this process. That's why you cannot do this on, let's say, on a single day or 2 days in a row and on an offsite. It needs a longer process.
Okay. Yeah, so pretty much all we're trying to talk about, you're trying to get the senior leaders to think about, based on all these 10 elements, What
Yes.
exactly, for instance, what are like maybe the pain points you're currently seeing? Where do they see themselves? How do they want to position themselves? How do
Yes.
they want to drive maybe the market from maybe a revenue model perspective, right? Or if it's like based on customer needs or based on
Hmm.
competition. So it's going to be like a big brainstorming session, and people are going to come with ideas to say, maybe we want to become the next Apple in the next 5 years, or, we want to create like a product that's going to be more sustainable, whatever that is. These ideas are going to be put on the table. And from there, I guess it's probably going to be like a whittling down where you're going to say, okay, with all of this, how are we going to get there? You know,
Yeah,
uh,
one step before is, let's suppose we want to be like Apple in 5 years. Let's
yeah,
assume that's in the values and goals. That's the core idea, the core ambition. Then the
yeah.
next question is, what does it mean for all the other 9 elements? What kind of customers would fit? What kind of value proposition would fit? So you would go back and forth between those elements, create alignment, and then indeed you get like the future picture of what the strategy along these 10 elements of the company should look like.
That's right. And that's
Yeah.
and from all of that, a particular path will then obviously have to be created, right? You're going to then say, for us to get
Yes.
there, we need to launch 5 projects, for instance, right?
Yes.
And that means that we need to get a team of people. This is kind of where the PMs are more likely brought in. But now,
Yes.
as I hope, as project professionals, when you kind of understand that before you actually brought into the conversation or given a product chatter, there's some reasons behind why this project was actually created or initiated in the first place. And so getting
Yes.
a little glimpse of that positions you to say, okay, now I get it. Because we want to become a technology giant in the next 5 years, whatever I do as a project manager, my project or the upgrades have to be in by certain time. So even if you feel that you're successful by bringing your projects in on time, on budget, and on schedule, if there's a timeline that doesn't tie back to the overall strategic goals and objectives, then there's a problem. There's already a failure. So that way, you have to understand what are the key drivers, how it ties into the different components. And the beauty about this is that we have Jerome had given us this document. So for everyone who's actually joined us today, there's going to be a link for you to actually sign up. You're going to be receiving a free copy of all of this. I think this is just a perfect segue for Project Lifestyle. Right here, I just want to just dive in pretty quickly. I said it for Jerome to actually just get time to breathe before we get into the next segment. When we think about strategy, how does it apply to our life overall? Organizations sit back and leaders think, where do we want to be in the next 5 years or 10 years? What does that mean and how does this apply it? And how does it affect all the components within our key drivers and indicators? As a leader yourself, do you sit back to create a strategy that connects every aspect of your life to understand what the vision is? Where do you want to get to? How do you want to even get there? This is extremely important because without thinking about the overall picture, just trying to get a piece and fixing something, just like a design thinker, there may be elements of it that actually out of whack. So I want to go through a couple of steps that I have walked through and I feel that will be relevant for you to create an overall strategy for your life in putting that together. I think first of all, it always starts with define a plan, define a vision. Where do you want to be in the longer term? What are your goals as a leader? How exactly do you want to get there is another conversation, but what specifically do you really want? They talk about breaking down to becoming smart goals. That's okay. Make sure it's specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, or time bound. But again, at times I want to challenge that. A lot of the time, I want you to think about it. It might not be as realistic in the shorter term, but how much do you want to push yourself? Where do you see yourself in the next even 10 years? But what feeds into that is always a self assessment. Where exactly are you good at? What's your zone of genius? Because for you to achieve that vision and objective that you have, you need to have the skills to drive that. Or maybe you may need to probably outsource it or maybe get a coach or someone to help you. But the key is understanding what your strengths really are. What are your values? What can you do to even make you even better? And the next piece is actually being able to prioritize and focus. Once you've created all of this plan and you have it all together, you need to think about what are the key things I want to tackle in the next 3 months, in the next 6 months, in the next 1 year. Prioritizing them and breaking them down into the little pieces, just as a project manager will always do, right? You have a plan, you create a work breakdown structure, you create all of that, and that feeds into your plan. And when you do that, you can actually keep on adjusting and continuously improving. And overall, you've got people like your home as well who can actually support you when you're creating a strategy. Get help and get support. I want to bring my leader back on screen. When we think about our overall life strategy, how can we connect all of these grand ideas as well? Just how have actually spoken about it today and creating a strategic plan for our lives. What are your thoughts on that?
Yes, that's a beautiful question. And I think a lot of the answers you have already given yourself. And to give a very boring answer again, I use this, I practice as I preach. So I've used this sketch also not just to think about clients, but also about my own my private life. And in what you described, I think you already related to that is, okay, what are your values? What are your zone of genius? That's your resources. What are your ambitions? That's kind of this high level. Where do you want to be 5 years from now, 10 years from now? What I find important to add is it's not just, and this is exactly what's going wrong in some companies as well. It's again the logic that is missing. You might have ambitions, dreams, objectives, and so on, but what's the underlying logic? So what's your business model? What's your strategy? And this is what I'm not. We're not using the sketch like as a family on the kitchen table, but almost. And this is also what I've been using in my teaching. Like, how do you create your private strategy? What is your value proposition as a person? Who actually is your client? In your current job, maybe your manager is your primary client. Okay, what is your value proposition to that client? Who is the competition? Maybe some of your colleagues are competition. So it works within a company, but also like as a family. Like, what's your overarching revenue model? And this is actually the way my wife and I look at what we're doing. Is like, who is bringing in which part of the money, and how, who is making a more societal contribution, and how, what kind of skills do we have, what do we like. So I'm literally kind of using this sketch every now and then, in the meanwhile more implicitly in my head because I know it by heart, to assess, okay, are we still on track? And the very reason I do what I do, and the very reason I sit here, is a result of that. Because in the past, I was, as I mentioned, working at a university. I had a full-time tenured contract, so I could stay there for the rest of my life. I decided to quit because of evaluating my, at that time, current strategy. Like, my core values and my ambitions, did it match what I could do at a university? Not entirely. Looking at my skills and competences, did I use those to the max possible extent? No. If I looked at my revenue possibilities, did I use that to the best, in the best way? No. So that really applying this strategic thinking with the model we've seen has led me to make choices in my career that I would otherwise probably not have taken, or not yet.
That's absolutely great. And when we talk about leveraging the same skill set to create something even better to amplify success, not just becoming the best at work, but creating a better life for yourself. This is a perfect segue as we're going to get into the hot seat. So you're home. So brace yourself. We're going to get into questions and answers. And just for people who don't actually know, there's a chance for you to go in the comments and put your questions, because we're going to be taking questions right now. And if you experience any glitch, you can actually connect with us live on LinkedIn. And don't forget to like and subscribe as well if you haven't done that yet. So let's go right now. Okay, we've got the first question from Jenny Fuller. How do you recommend measuring strategy?
Measuring strategy, yes. I think what is important is maybe not measuring the strategy, but some sort of development. And the way I measure, of course, when you have these 10 elements, or when you have defined your strategy, you turn them into objectives, and maybe you're using OKR or any other methods. So that's the content part. But what I find important is basically three measures. One is relevance. Is what you're doing still the right thing to do? So again, these 10 elements, you can look, okay, has the world changed? Has anything changed? Are we still on the right track? Or do we need to pivot? Do we need to change our strategy? Same with the project. You might have, there's all kind of assumptions in the beginning. And after half a year or whatever period, things might have changed. So whatever you were aspiring for, whatever you were planning to, may not be relevant anymore. So the first is check relevance. Second, check progress. That's the typical project management or progress management or process management. Have we done what we should have done? Have we achieved what we should have achieved? The third one is mood, emotions. Are people still on board? Do they still believe in the strategy? Do they still accept that it's worthwhile executing? And that's kind of the indicator that's often forgotten, but it's a very important one because the strategy can still be relevant on paper. You can still make the progress. So those are the kind of the official parts of the strategy. But if people already are kind of doubting, there's some gossip, there's questions, that's an early indicator that things are not going as they should be going, and they will cause problems in a couple of months in the next evaluation cycle. So relevant, progress, and mood. That's what I would measure to measure the development of the strategy over time.
I love that piece because when I think about even the qualities of being a strategic project leader, it's all about agility. It's a major element. Be the key organizational strategy actually being set, you always need to go back and check how relevant is it? How far has the market even moved? Because you may be thinking that you want to, go into a particular market and you want to do something different, but things could have changed with technology now and innovation. You need to embrace flexibility and change. And as a project professional, when you create your own project strategy, it has to connect to that overall strategy. You're always checking to see where am I at in my project? Based on the charter that I've actually signed off and based on the business case, how relevant is it? How does it still tie back to the relevance of the revised strategy? And I love the fact that you highlighted the mood, right? What's the pulse, right? What are the Gen Zs and the millennials saying? What do they want now? Do they want a phone that actually flies? Or do they want, a robot that can actually speak back to them? What exactly are we doing? How are we ensuring that we are up to date, even with sustainability? What are the regulations that are already out there at the moment? And how are you ensuring that you are staying relevant? So I love that. Relevance, progress, agility, mood as well. So let's go to the next one. Brace up. So it's a long one. How can you differentiate between tactical, strategic, transformation, and operational leadership roles to create value in the organization? Like you said, a PM run the entire show. I'm just trying to pick out the essence there. So pretty much, so maybe just tie it in summary. So probably how could you differentiate? So being tactical and strategic transformation, so tying back to strategy, probably how can you combine all of those pieces and maybe deliver value?
Yeah, maybe I'm not giving the answer hoped for, because I challenge the difference. I never talk about tactical, operational, and strategic. And the reason is, for me, when you think about strategy as the unique and sustainable value creation of the company, at every level in the company, you can think strategically. So in that sense, I have quite a different view on the traditional view is top of the company is strategic, then middle is tactical, and the bottom is operational. I can't work with that distinction. For me, strategy is more an aspect of everyone's job in the company. As a comparison, I often refer to quality management, the whole continuous improvement, lean, Six Sigma, the whole family of approaches that developed from Toyota in the 1980s. That is, in the past, it was kind of a staff thing. The big changes, they have made continuous improvement, quality management part of everyone's job. And for me, the ideal world of strategy in a company looks like that, is that at every level you think strategically about what are the things in my job, the issues, the insights, the ideas that I see that are relevant, not just for my job, but for a bigger part of the company. And maybe for not just for the next week, but for the next couple of years. And I'm sure that maybe not everyone, but and this way you're using the collective intelligence of your company to have not just a few at the top think about strategy, but have everyone in the company every now and then think about that too. So that's maybe not. So basically, I ignore the difference and focus on the strategic part, and link whatever you do to these 10 elements. And that's the way I work.
No, for sure. You're definitely aligned because that's kind of like my own disruption that I bring to project management as well. I say I want to create strategic project leaders because it doesn't matter the level that you are at, there has to be that strategic
Yeah.
thinking, the
It's a
critical thinking,
mindset.
that
It's a way of
connection.
thinking. Yes.
Exactly. Because if you're not constantly thinking about how exactly can I make the bigger picture and the organization better. It doesn't matter if you're a customer service representative, right? Is it from the way you deliver value to your customers? You need to think about how does it affect the bottom line? How does it affect those key
Yes.
indicators that has already been set? So it's not a case that you're not going to go in and do the tactical stuff and do your work on the day to day, but every single element has to feedback to how it moves the needle for your organization. That's what's going to set you apart from everybody else. That's also going to also set you apart to make you the next person for the next opportunity to go to the next level, because you understand how things are actually moving at the very, very top, and your role connects directly. And it's interesting, like even when people go for their yearly reviews with your leaders, and they wonder like, how come I just got a 1% raise? I'm like, did you go with your receipts? How did your role do something that affected the organization at that very, very top level? And you have to create the link and have a plan to say, yes, I have done this. I have been able to improve maybe like the customer service. I've been able to like execute on my plans. And because I did it and impacted our contract services. And now because of that, it ties back to that layer when it comes to customer connection on that your actual box. Tying everything back there creates a key differentiation every single time. And so I love that answer. It doesn't matter what your role is. You need to align to whatever the big picture is and connect your day-to-day activities as well with that. Okay, I know you're almost like, oh, what's next? What would you say is the number
Just
one
the music. I'm kind of this excitement creating music. That's what I'm
Okay,
laughing at.
okay, that's nice. What would you say is like your number one challenge that you've had through your career, and how did you overcome it?
My number one challenge in my career, um, I think the most important, the most difficult thing was be myself. I think that's the short answer. Be myself. Not and so unlearning what I should do, and that started with at the university. There's all kind of rules about how you're supposed to write, how you're supposed to do research, and so on. But in many other ways in life as well, there's all kind of implicit and explicit rules that you're supposed to follow in order to be successful, be happy, and so on. And for me, the biggest challenge has to get rid of all of that, and I have not succeeded in that yet. To get rid of most of that and really go back to yourself, to your guts, to your heart, is what do I think? What do I feel? And be authentic and not try to do it according to the book or according to expectations, but how you think things should be done. And that's probably also why I pay so much attention in my work with clients to let people speak out what they think. Because often, especially if it's kind of not the top, but lower level and lower in air quotes, um, they feel not safe enough or secure enough to really show what they think. And that's really dangerous for a company because they probably have a very good intuition. They know something is wrong. They might not have the data to really prove it, but relying on your guts, on your intuition, I think that's something I've had to learn, and I'm still learning. It has both been the most important part and probably the most difficult part as well.
I think having the mindset of just being open to learn and get new ideas is just, I think it's a life hack. And people need to embrace that mindset to just understand that, there's always going to be someone who has got a better idea. There's always going to be someone who I can get something from. It's not going to be my way or the highway. Those are the things that also differentiate leaders who become transformational and they create legacies than those who kind of feel that I think I've just got the silver bullet and that's what it is. I think that's a key one. overall, there's so many more questions. But what I really want to say is that when we think about strategy, because we're talking about taking it full circle, you think about
Hmm.
from design, from prioritization to we bringing it into action. What I've actually got is that it doesn't matter where you sit, is you need to go back and understand. Go back today to your organizations, probably the key documents and say, what are those key things that the key drivers? It's
Hmm.
probably written. For some organizations, maybe you're the CEO or the C-suite actually, they cascade that piece and say, I want to understand what exactly are the key drivers? Why are we even in business in the first place? Because you may not even be
Hmm.
aware and you're just in a silo saying that I have my mandate. I know what my job description actually says, but what differentiates you from everybody else is how you align. And I love I've got Lee Lambert here who kind of says that if you cannot connect to that big picture, you're actually screwed because that's what it is. For you to
Hmm.
move up vertically in the organization, for you to build something greater and better for yourself, it's all about creating value. And as strategic project leaders, you're all about accelerating value creation. And that's what we're about. Oh God, Jerome, I want to say thank you so much, Jerome, because you've actually been awesome. I know there's so much that we can actually dive into, but this is just giving people an insight into your world and what they can actually find. But tell us a little bit about you. How can people actually find you and get to know what's coming on the horizon?
Uh, yeah, they can easily find me on LinkedIn. Uh, the advantage of my name is once you spell it correctly, there's only one. So if you just see it in the screen now. If you type it in Google, everything you will find is indeed me.
That's great.
My website is also jeroenkraaijenbrink.com, first name, last name. So that's and maybe one very new initiative, if you allow me, Vola, to talk about it briefly,
Yeah,
is strategy.inc.
yeah, I'm gonna
It's
pull
a
that up.
it's a it, initiative with Tim Teriyaki, which is actually we are right at launch now, or actually pre-launch because we launch next week, which is a training for anyone who would like to become a certified strategy and implementation consultant. So basically, what we have done there is what I try to do there is everything that I've learned, the way I work with my clients, teach others to do it exactly that way. So any consultant, facilitator, coach that is interested in moving to more strategy consulting and implementation consulting, yeah, take a look. And this is a program we've specially designed for experienced facilitators, coaches, consultants that are, or maybe project managers that really want to move to a strategy, facilitation, and consulting position. So those are probably the three. There's more. I have a Forbes page, I have an Amazon page, but LinkedIn, jeroenkraaijenbrink.com, and strategy.inc. That's enough advertising for now.
No, that's right. Because the key, as we actually just heard, is that it doesn't matter where exactly you're at within the organization. You're all about helping drive strategy. You're all about helping
Yes.
shape strategy. You're all
Yep.
about helping organization actually achieve the strategic goals and objectives. So that's a great resource that you definitely need to tap into. I want to say thank you to Rahul, to Joshua, to Chilo. I want to say thank you to Grace, to Jeremy, to Tarika, that the names goes on from all over the world that people have actually gathered to actually hear us speak. It's been a great time from Pakistan, from India, from Canada, from Accra, from Saskatchewan, from Chicago. It's from we. I just want to say you guys actually make today even better. Oh, I've got Jose from Mexico, from Pamela from Cleveland. What I always say every single time is, with all the great ideas that you've actually learned, it always takes action. This will mean nothing if you don't do anything with it. As your life's project manager, you have got the keys to go off and execute and create the life you truly crave. It's definitely up to you. If you take action today, then things will definitely be different. But if you sit back and say, no, what does that look like? Remember, you want to create that unique value add and think about what exactly is it that I have that adds value to my organization. How do I go back and understand what are the key drivers for the organization? What are the key drivers for me as an individual? And how do I shape that? How do I create something even better? Once again, I want to say thank you to everyone who's actually joined us live. I want to know one key thing that you're going to be taking away as an action point. One key thing in the comments, please leave that right there. And with every good idea, it makes a lot of sense to share with someone, and maybe even your boss or someone could even say, that's definitely a great value, and that could actually shape the trajectory of your life and your career overall. Always remember that you've got this. See you same time next week as we share great insights that will definitely shape your career, your business, and your life. Have yourself a good Saturday. Bye-bye.